LA, Apollo,
God vibes only. 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 vibes only. God 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 vibes only.
You are now tuned in to the Cosmic Convos podcast, your number one source for accurate, relevant, and thought-provoking astrological conversations in the podcast nation, the place where stars and minds align.
Peace. You're now tuned into the Cosmic Convos podcast. I'm your humble host, Harut, and I got my good brother here, Brother Ra, and we got a special guest in the building as well, or whatnot. Big up. What's up? Hold on 1 second. Let me see something real quick. You know, Rahu and K2 just did his thing, so we might have some little technical. We already have some technical difficulties.
You already know.
Indeed. We gonna get Rod to refresh his. Come out and come in, and then I'll bring you back up, brother.
You want me to come out and come back in?
Yep. All right, but while we wait for him to come in, as always, this episode is brought to you by Push It Forward Media Group, Navamsha Astrology, and our good people over there on Patreon. Big up to y'all or whatnot. Big up to y'all. Thank you all for the support or whatnot. If you want to get a hold of us, you can visit us at Instagram at Cosmic Convo. That's CosmicConvo on Instagram. Brother Ra, how can the people get a hold of you?
Right now, it's the same old same. You can hit me up on IG or FB via Shechem Round, or if you want to get at me via Gmail, you can always get at me at kalaprusha.astrology@gmail.com.
Indeed. Let me see. I'm trying to switch this camera, man. But nonetheless, so we're here at episode 12, season 5. We're trucking along, making some things happen and whatnot. Our show last week, we're on the day. These things are upon us, So, if you're watching this live, yesterday Jupiter went into Pisces or whatnot, and right as we speak, just a few, maybe about an hour ago, if you're using the mean node, Rahu and K2 just made its shift or whatnot. So this should be interesting as well.
Yeah, indeed. It's definitely going to be an interesting next few years, to say the least.
Oh, that's that's an understatement. Indeed. So, Rob, man, we got special guests in here, man. Who you got in here with you, brother?
Got a good brother here. This is a student that's been with me, rocking with me for quite some time. This is my brother Sambo. He's at the adept level, so he's definitely rocking and rolling with the best of them. He's just gonna ride out with us. Brother's got some deep insight into the knowledge. He's well studied, so he's definitely prepared and able to make some commentary as we go. So, welcome everybody. Welcome Sambo to the table. It's a pleasure having you here with us.
Peace.
Indeed, peace. Shout out to you, brother. So with that being said, though, I mean, you should go ahead and plug the classes, brother. So they can be like Sambo out here, man. Sit next to the man, or whatnot, But yeah, so definitely holler at Ra for the for the classes he got going on and everything like that, and get you right or whatnot. But yeah, so it's interesting time. Interesting thing. A lot of people are pulling out their charts. A lot of people are, starting to get into different things, trying to understand the shifts. You should, because there's a lot of things going on. And one important kind of aspect of, studying your astrological, destiny and everything like that is, if you're studying Jyotish or Vedic astrology, it's divisional charts. And, over the, years, we've mentioned this particular chart here and there, but we've never actually done a show to really dive in specifically on this chart. So today we're going to actually do, a bit of not a super deep dive, because we could probably do 10 shows on this chart alone or whatnot. But, we're going to focus our attention on one of the main divisional charts is the D9 chart, the Navamsha chart. So big up to that. And Rock, can I get you to come a little closer to the mic?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Is that a little bit better?
Yeah, I think we're good. Think we're good. We're good money.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Indeed. So, yeah, man. Let's talk about this Navamsha, this D9.
Yeah, there's a lot of conjecture, a lot of opinions, a lot of techniques, a lot of applications that go along with the D9. It's nothing new to hear where people will apply it in various ways, and it should be because it's a dynamic chart. It's one of the most important charts in Vedic astrology and Jyotish. It's a Varga that we use that actually is extracted out of the nakshatra system.
Hmm.
Um, there's 108 points in the zodiac based on the nakshatras, right? 27 times 4 equals 108, right? So there's 108 points that we can use to actually modulate or see the inner world of how a planet is functioning based on certain principles and certain underpinnings, right? The D9 is just one Varga, though, but it's one of the most important Vargas that's used in this particular science. So, there's a lot of conjectures, a lot of stories, a lot of things that people say. I've heard people say that it becomes you after a certain age, it becomes you after marriage, it becomes you once you take a spiritual vow. Those are all to some degree true, but the reality is that the real you is the D1, right? The D1 is always you because without a D1, there is no discussion, right?
Right.
We don't talk about anything. We can't talk about a D9 without a D1. So the D1 is you. It's you as you are as your embodiment as who you are. And the thing about it is Varga's divisional charts, the other name for it, what they're called, um, they're really cuts and slices. They're microscopic examinations of each particular area in life. So, for example, what we're going to talk about today is the ninth house. The D9 is the actual kind of inner world of the ninth house. So, for example, you'll see people that have a very strong ninth house, right? But they may have some circumstantial things going on in the D9 as far as their setups are concerned. What they're showing you is that there's a struggle, right, that this person is going through to show you or for you to see what you see in regards to their life in the present state. What you see in the ninth house in the D9 is the inner world of that particular chart. It's the under kind of girding that's happening. And so it's not only say the subconscious, but it's the what's behind the veil, what's behind the front end of an individual. So sometimes you can see that that person may be very well be having issues with pulling off the ninth house manifestation in their chart. But there's other charts that we also look at that kind of substantiate or regulate what that D9 is showing us, right? Such as the D20, the D30, the D60. Those are all charts that we use to kind of gauge to see what's going on in the inner in as far as the interfacing of those charts. But
You know, that's kind of like the telltale, because I always wonder that when I first started studying this science and you start looking into divisional charts, why would the marriage chart per se be the D9? Right.
right,
I mean, why would it be a deep dive into the D9? So that I always kind of looked at that, and just even looking at my own
hmm
D9 and just kind
hmm
of reconcile it, I can see that just based on, just the spiritual, perspective we come from and stuff like that. I can see it from that perspective, but in the way that I've heard other astrologers talk about it, I don't see it in that particular light, you
you
know?
know, the thing about marriage is this, right? And because we live in this kind of we live in a thirsty culture,
Right.
right? Everybody's thirsty. The number one question I get is not profession, it's not health, it's not spiritual development, it's who is my soulmate, right?
Right.
Who am I supposed to be with, right? The most important person for you to be with is yourself, right?
Hmm.
If you can't be with yourself, how can you be with anybody, right?
Right.
If you can't stand you, no one else is going to be able to stand you either, right? If you can't look in the mirror and feel good about who you are, know your proclivities, know your challenges, know your strengths and your weaknesses, right? Then what's the purpose of even dealing with someone because they're not going to be able to deal with you anyway? So we
Right.
live in a very thirsty world. We live in in a world that is so just destitute to have somebody, right? We're in a culture that has been um, uh, uh, taken away from the naturalness of life. I
Oh
mean,
yeah, completely. Because we think that we think that we can survive individually, right? I mean, it's not. It's the coupling of people or whatever, however your family structure is set up
right,
is been made optional these
right,
days.
right. And 120 years ago, that wasn't even a conversation.
Right,
Even
right.
50 years ago, when we were going through our challenges and changes, when we bought into the American dream, right,
Hmm.
or the American nightmare is what we bought into, right? Um, 50 years ago, well, even I don't say 50, let's say 60 years ago, right? That was a different conversation. It was almost automatic that you'd be married, right? It was almost automatic. It wasn't even a thought process to go there, right? But with the all the adages that we have, as far as, I mean, think about just the telephone, just the device of a telephone, right?
Right.
Long distance relationships happen through the phone, right?
Yeah.
Or they did, right? Then they have the adage of, technology increased with the beeper, right? So you're off somewhere doing something, you get a text, then you got to go run and make a phone call. Then they come up with cell phones. Now they have where you can see each other live, right? So all these inventions, these kind of themes that are supposed to advance culture, have actually retarded it. Now you have it to where you have dating apps, right?
Right.
That's where you most people find in their true love, right? And the question is, am I gonna get married? Am I gonna find my true love, right?
I mean, because it throws the whole game off. Because you're never like, we were never supposed to be able to have access to somebody, all the way across the world. You understand what I'm saying? It changes the whole dynamics. I mean, you were dealing in a situation where you lived in a small community at maybe maybe a few hundred to 10,000 people or so,
Hmm.
that you lived in those type of times, and that was your dating pool. You
Exactly.
understand? That was your dating pool. So now you're over here thinking about, somebody that's way across the world. And, to be honest with you, I mean, it's still, even though you could, I guess technically you can make it happen, it's still, your dating pool is still within the realm of the people that you see, honestly, or
Right.
whatnot. It's just, yeah.
It's artificial, and so
Right.
everybody's thirsty. You know, um, just the fact of meeting someone organically is almost, it's near to awkward now. Meeting someone organically, meeting at a grocery store or at a concert, or I mean, it happens. But even considering the club, right? The club where you get clubbed in the head, right, and you walk out of there as a bludgeoned object, right? You know, right? You still, it's still, you're meeting someone that is not real, right? And before all of these things that we dealt with, you had to deal with the real person. You dealt with their family, number one, right?
Hmm.
You dealt with their family. I know who you are because I know your mom and them, right? And I know your brother. And your brother said, "You better not do my sister wrong," right? And
Right.
or vice versa. You better not. There was some context to who you were meeting. Now you're meeting someone that is an etheric being that they play all these games, right?
Hate there.
They're somewhere else, right? They're not here. They're not present, right? They're not
That's
here. Someone you're meeting is somewhere else.
right.
So, in context of what we talk about is marriage, when we talk about that, nothing comes up with regards to the context of spiritual growth and development. Not even in the least. You know,
Right.
she got this and he's got that, and she can do this and she can do that. All of it's in service of someone else, but never in service of the divine. And that's the only way you can talk about the D9 in regards to relationships from a realistic standpoint. Other than that, you'd be better off looking at the D7. In
Right.
this context, in this world, we talk about India, and India has become so modernized, but even still in India, there is somewhat of a lingering context of marriage in the sense of the sacrimonious or the sacredness of it. It's not just to just go get married. That's why, people frown upon or cringe when we talk about you know um,
Arranged marriages.
arranged marriages.
Right.
But in some way, right, our ancestors and those people that are out of these kind of cultures that come from ancient purviews, they had it right.
Yeah, I mean, it's not because the problem is that you look at relationship as a point of companionship or somebody who's supposed to be there to satisfy whatever little needs you have and stuff like that versus it's like it's a little nation that you have right there. You understand what I'm saying? Your family is like a little nation. You understand what I'm saying?
A microcosm.
Right. And you have a goal. You have things that you and your family is supposed to contribute to
Yeah.
the entire kind of divine plan and different things like that.
Yeah, it's a microcosm.
Right.
And think about the microcosm that's spilling out into the world today. And I'm not here to badger or bash anyone's way of life, right?
Yeah.
That is a choice that is inherent within your destiny, quote unquote choice, right? But nonetheless, right, it's almost like one thing begets another. One entity begets another entity begets another, and it becomes a trickle down process whereby you have these kind of situations where people are wondering why the fabric of society is falling apart. Well, the fabric of society is the microcosm that you were talking about, right? That's the thread that runs through, right? The interlacing that runs through society at its core, and all of these freedoms that we've been given. Oh, I don't need you. You don't need me, right? A man is made for a woman, and a woman is made for a man. That's the baseline of reality.
Right.
Right? In astrology, we have that as an underpinning. You have sun, you have moon, you have Mars, you have Venus, right? And considering, right, Sun, Moon, Mars, Venus, right, Jupiter with the only being exception, the other two planets are neutral, Saturn and Mercury.
Right.
So if you understand how things work spiritually speaking, the supreme being already instituted inside of creation. That's why you have a positive sign and a negative sign. You have a masculine sign, you have a feminine sign. You don't have a third type of sign, right?
Right.
It's not in there, right? Maybe another astrology that you might figure out. Maybe 13 sign astrology. Y'all might get that, right? But in 12 sign,
Man, they trying to throw it in there.
What's the big craze that a lot of people are on now? The human design or whatever.
oh man, I got a client that we talk about that human design, right? And it's here we go, right? Back to these tests, these tests that are supposed to be able to determine your real nature. And some of it is true because some of it is part of what is connected to the stars anyway. But the stars are going to be able to foretell. That's the difference. Human design cannot foretell, right? It can only prognosticate, right?
Mhm.
It can only diagnose. We can diagnose, prognosticate, and we can see into to the unfolding of those things that you're looking at from a static point of view. That's why it surpasses those things by far. But nonetheless, right, in regards to the D9, you have 108 reality, 100 and level, 108 perceptions of a planet. You have 108 places that a planet can be. Why 108? Well, 108 is the relative space between the Earth and the Moon, right? Right. There's 108 is a relative perspective between the Earth and the Sun. So we're talking about Earth, Sun, and Moon, right? Mind, body, and what? And
So.
soul. Well, the mind, body, and soul, the ultimate goal of soul is to self realize, to become self aware, to make sure that you are aware that this is real and you've been here before and you're going to be here again. That's what
Right.
self realization is all about. All the other spiritual practices and things that we participate in is just to click on that mechanism to say, you know what? This is something that is beyond the physical. It's, I don't want to say metaphysical, right? but it's something that will linger on. The things that I do now will be consequences or rewards that I have to pick up later on. And that's what we call fortune, right? There's no such thing as luck or right bad luck or good luck. That's called karma. It's fortune. And the ninth house is the secret chart. The ninth house is the secret house to see the fortune, to see the karma, to see the positive and negative effects of what you bring to the table. So when we talk about the D9, we're unlocking the hidden aspects of fortune,
Right.
right? We're unlocking the dharmic perspective. Now, what is dharma, right? Because the ninth house is a dharma house. You have 1, 5, and 9. All dharma houses. The highest and most powerful is the ninth. So the ninth house holds the secrets to your spiritual, right, awareness, to your ability to apply what it is that you proclaim. Why I say proclaim? Because the opposite to the ninth house is what house? The
Third.
third. The 10th house is the second to the ninth. The 10th house is your profession, what you profess, what you stand on, right? The sthana, or the place where you put yourself out into the world. The ninth house is the 12th to the 10th, and the 10th house is 12th to the ninth. So these interrelating kind of inner facets of the ninth house are seen in large, or right, in microcosm rather, in the minutia. We kind of pick it out through the D9. Nothing is said about marriage. The sun, body, mind, and soul has nothing to do with marriage. Your soulmate, what is a soulmate? What does your soul that incarnates over and over and over again need with somebody in the first place? You're already going to get a set of circumstances whereby you're going to repay the debt that you owe other people. You're
Right.
gonna you're gonna you're gonna get a chance to work out that debt. Oh, you don't get off, right? It's not a free for all. There's set parameters that you have to come through, that you have to realize that these are things that you have to deal with. That's why it's almost seems familiar when we meet people. And where do I know you from? It's almost kind of how do I know you? Right,
Right.
right. So again, this is when you begin to realize that life is about what's called Renu Bandha, right? Renu Bandha. Bandha is a yoke, or it's not. It's like a bind. Bandha and bind is a
Right.
connection. It's a tie. So when you're dealing with your mate, you're dealing with that debt. How well you pay it off is how well you will receive your fortune. That's where the spiritual aspects come in, through the context of being with a partner or with a long-term committed union. But most people are not in the thought process of doing spiritual work through a relationship. They're there for the pleasures, the benefits, and when those run out, we run out.
Right. Yeah. It's hard work, man. It's like it ain't. It really is. It's not. At a certain point, if you've ever, had any type of relationship with any type of longevity, you do reach to a point to where it's like, there's. It sounds. It's gonna sound funny, but it becomes mostly duty. You understand what I'm saying? It becomes mostly duty, and then you really, the honeymoon period is not quite there, and then you start understanding, what is this person that's right next to you, why they're going to challenge you in ways that no one else challenges you. you
Absolutely.
know the very thing that you don't quote unquote like is that's what that person's going to do. They're going to do it and do it well.
And the thing is that with no spiritual training,
Right. You're going to fail.
miserably, right? And not only with, and let's say even with spiritual training, you're bombarded with a constant, consistent image of moving on to what's called the grass is greener syndrome,
Right.
right? The songs that we listen to, right? The music that we listen to is not reinforcing true unconditional love, which is what Jupiter represents, and that's the ruler of Sagittarius, which is the ninth sign, hence an affinity to the ninth house. That's the Dharma that we're
Right.
talking about, right? Unconditional love. Loving when I can't stand you, right? Loving when you just get on, you snore, you right, you smack your food, right? You don't all the things that I despise, right?
Every time I know that's a thing with you, man. That smacking, man. 'Cause I
Smack,
see every time you say it, man. It's
right?
this dude, man, that was at work,
Just
man, that I
just
used to work
you know,
with. You would have hated him, man. Oh my
oh
gosh,
man,
man. You he was like just
oh man, yeah,
like
man. Close
like
your
we used
mouth.
to.
Can you breathe and chew at the same time, right? Is it too much for the brain, right? Is it you're having troubles, right? But
Right.
all the little things you don't pick up after yourself, right? You know you don't pay bills on time. I mean, you could the list goes on and on. But here's why we begin to understand the context of the importance of spiritual development prior to marriage, right? Because if you do that, you're setting yourself up to have a very fortuitous ninth house, a fortuitous D9. And the other thing that we do in the D9 is that we see the actual inner strengths of the planets. That's
Mhm.
one of the things that we measure, right? You have a lot of different things. I mean, like you said, we could be here for 10 episodes talking about the D9. You got the Karakamsha, you got the Swamsha, right? You got the Ishtadavata, right? All of these things are seen via the D9, right? But the one thing you can always look to in a chart is the trines. The trines are keys because the master trine is the ninth house. So in the D9, you look to the master trine to see the condition of that Lord, right? To see how well it's situated, to see if it's powerful, if it's weakened, if it's aspected, right? You also look at the trines from the Karakamsha. And the Karakamsha, the way you find it, is very simple. You find the Atma Karaka in the D1, right? That's the planet that has the highest degree. Of course, I don't use Rahu or Ketu because they're not real planets. Anything that's solid that can be seen, taste, touched, or felt is represented as the seven Karakas, right? Some people
Right.
use eight. I don't. I've been taught to use seven. It's very worked very well, right? Because Rahu is not really supposed to be here. It's something that happened as a byproduct. And when you understand the story behind Sravanu, you understand that the sun and the moon found Rahu taking the nectar. So Rahu is not considered as a being amongst right those that can render spiritual development. It's just the truth, right?
Right.
But under out of the seven, right, you find the planet that is the highest degree, and you take that planet and you superimpose it into the D9. Wherever that planet is placed, that particular house and sign becomes your Karakamsha. The Karakamsha is the soul's lesson plan, right? I said the soul's lesson plan, not the mate's lesson plan. Pay attention, right? If it's the soul and the soul leaves this fleshly body, right, it moves on. Next assignment. However you treated your partner, right, your friends, your allies, right, becomes your fortune in the new existence. So if your fortune has been weighed properly, and we weigh our heart on the scale according to the Kemetic vernacular, right? Different different things in Tibet, right? In Tibet, they have what's called Lord Yama. Yama is sitting there with a white pebble and a black pebble. He drops a white pebble for the positives and a black pebble for the negatives. And whatever weighs out is what you get when you get ready to come back. That it's that way in all spiritual cultures. I said spiritual culture, not religious,
Right.
right? So in light of that, right, the person that you would treat, sometimes the person you treat the worst is the person that's next to you. What is the old adage, right? You take out those issues on the person that's closest to you,
Yeah.
right? So in the context of those dynamics, then you can talk about the D9 as a quote unquote marriage chart, your spousal chart. But again, how many of us are spiritually developed? That's why I tell people I can read your chart to 90% accuracy, sometimes 100. You know why? Because you haven't developed your will. Your will is infantile. That's why our set in our tradition holds baby Haru. Your will is infantile. You can't control your mouth. You can't control your appetites. You can't control your thinking. You can't control your actions. So if you can't control that, then desire, desidare, which is literally breaks down to being of the stars, runs you and rules you. And it impels you to a point where you can't understand the difference between being impelled and compelled. So that's why I
Right.
can read your chart so accurately. And I don't care what you say. If I know you're weak willed, I know if it's infantile, it's your limp noodle when it comes to spiritual development. How do I know? Diet. How do I know? How you formulate your daily practices. How do I know what you do on a regular basis? How you treat other people. How do I know what people come back and tell me about you? Man, you know she gonna take this, you know she's gonna do that. Not to say those things are necessarily 100% true, but things become a kind of groove or what we call a samskara when other people begin to recirculate those energies around. It begins to hold weight. And remember, if people see it, then the Supreme sees it through what they're seeing. You can't escape karma. Even you be by yourself on an island, the animals can still see, right? Things that nature, in fact, in of itself, doesn't need a physical vehicle to witness you. That's why we have what is called non-locality. Non-locality is a quantum physics concept whereby nothing is needed for consciousness to exist. But the way you treat others, the way you treat your environment, the way you treat things in life, right, becomes that debt that you owe. And if you don't have a developed will, you're going to do any and everything at any given time, right? So when we understand the context of this, then you apply it to the D9. Then it becomes your dharmic path, your spiritual program, what you have to literally balance yourself out with as far as the negatives you come in with. Because we all come in, because if you're physically talking to me, you have some negatives. I don't care how
Yeah.
great of a spiritual guru you are. If you're the we're going to talk about some people here very shortly, the Dalai Lama. If you, I don't care who you are, right? You're going to have some negatives that need to be rendered positive, that need to be balanced out. And so, if that's the case, then the D9 holds the weight of seeing how those things are done. Now, in the D9, like I said, the Karakamsha is the lesson plan for the soul. So we look at the fifth and the ninth house from those particular placements as well. Those are going to show me as an astrologer, as a Jyotishi, as a seer, what plans you come in with. Of course, I'm always going to look at the D1. The D1 and the D9 are interfaced, they're merged. If I see something in the ninth house very interesting, if I see a debilitated planet in the ninth house and I look in the D9 and say, well, the cancellation is in the D9, it does cancel it to some degree, but it still plays out in the D1. It does not stop. It just makes it to where the person gains control. They gain some self mastery. They put themselves on a higher trajectory, spiritually speaking. That means that they have understood the mistakes they've made and try to correct them to a high degree. That's all the D9 is telling you, why the cancellations are there. But there's no
Right.
real removal of anything. It just means that you begin to see your mistakes.
You overcome it.
Exactly. But there has to be something to what? Overcome.
Yeah, you know.
So, the planets that we look for, the primary planet you would think would be Jupiter in the D9. It's not, right? It's the planet that literally causes you to be distracted from your spiritual journey. It's the planet that it can catapult you if you use it wisely, but it can be a planet that can literally cause you to become disoriented, to become um, caught up in the physicality of life. That planet is Venus. That's the master planet for the D9. And Venus, actually, you wouldn't believe, right, is probably the fastest road to spirituality because once, and a great man named Raul Nephraim Shechem or Shechem, right, he said, right, if you want to begin spirituality, begin by telling yourself no. That's the first step. Tell yourself no. No, I'm not going to do that. No, I'm not going to. Then your will kind of shakes and, it wants to grow a little bit. It wants to, sprout. But until then, you give in to every whim, every idea, every thought. Those thoughts are lived out in the imagination, aren't they? Right? That's Venus.
Right.
Those thoughts are lived out. You might slap somebody in your mind, right? You don't slap them with the words, like you don't say how, no, you slap them in your imagination. That's the slingshot between here and your spiritual development. If you can control your imagination, control your thoughts, control your graphic thoughts, not your verbal, graphic, then you are on your way to spiritual development. It's hard. It's not meant to be easy, but that's the first thing that we look to. Of course, we also look to Jupiter. We want to see what Jupiter's doing. We want to see where Jupiter's placed. What's happening? We look at the Atma Karaka. What is it doing? We look at things that are, it's rare that you have stelliums in the D9. D9 spread, Varga charts spread the planets apart. So if you have a stellium in the D1, they kind of spread them. We can see the inner world of that one house. So if it's the sixth house that you have a stellium in, like for example, our the late and great Nipsey Hussle, right? He had four planets in the sixth house. We take a look at the D9, we can see how they're spread out. So we can see inside the sixth house, right, what those planets are doing in that context. And we can see it in the D as far as the ninth house is concerned. So the D9 is a very powerful and potent chart. It's one that you have to learn how to apply properly. Now, if you are developed spiritually, you have a control over your being, your lower being, that is your animal appetites, desires, and so forth. And then you get married with a context and an awareness that this is literally somebody that that I might as well go ahead and walk the whole entire walk out with, provided there's no physical abuse. And we can even still see that in the chart to some degree. We can still see that in the D1 if you're going to marry somebody that can potentially cause physical abuse. We look to the seventh lord, seventh house, seventh from the moon. We look at seven from Venus. We look at all those different combinations to see how you're going to play out the relationship in real time. But the D9 shows us the context of who you are in your spiritual development. If you're going to keep, now, Venus is also the planet of promises. And who do you make a promise to first and foremost is the supreme being, not the individual that you're married to. The individuals
Right.
you're married to is just a vehicle to play that out. So yes, it is a relationship chart. Secondarily, you would be better off looking at the D7. And for what I've learned, the D7 will give you a very strong context of how well you can handle mundane life as far as marriage is concerned. That will be better for you. If you don't want to live a spiritual life and apply these things, go to your D7. D7 is for children. They say children. See, let me just segue 1 second. We're going to get into some charts here in just a second. But let me segue something to you for just 1 second. You know, the ancestors and the ancients, they tell you things to confuse you purposely.
Right.
They don't tell you things outright. You have to have someone to guide you through that process. They say the D7 is for children. No, not really. It is in some way, but the D7 is more for the Western man, the relationship chart. I can tell you this, people look at you crazy, but when you apply it, it works. Look at the seventh house in the D7. Look at Venus in the D7. You'll see a lot better picture of who you're marrying or who you're going to marry and or divorce and marry again through the D7. Because children are a byproduct of what? See, they're tricking you. They're saying spirituality. They're saying the spouse, the spouse, the spouse. The spouse is a byproduct. When you understand the seventh sign in astrology, it's Libra. If you have patience, if you look deep, if you're spiritually aware, if you're not looking just for what is glitter and glamour, You'll choose differently than if you're just choosing based on what society proclaims as the prescription for marriage. How do they meditate? Do they have an oracular system? Do they have a spiritual guide or guru? Do they are they aware of their spiritual challenges and strengths? Are they uh, oriented around looking towards things from a higher purview? What is a parent? What did their parental lineage look? All of those things means that Saturn in the seventh sign means you're supposed to take your time in doing this. It's not just a free for all. If you do those things, then the D9 becomes a chart that, yes, then we can look to see what it looks like for marriage. But most people are a mess. I just hate to say it like that, but they are. We are a mess. So trying to look to the D9 and gain some, I want to see my mate through the D9. It's going to be hard. I mean, you're going to see some things, but you're not going to be able to gauge it properly until you gauge you properly. Look to yourself first. Look to who you are as a spiritual guide, a spiritual person that's being guided or cultivated. Then you'll see, oh, wait a minute, I need to go ahead and make sure that I control my Venus. I need to control my Mercury. If Mercury is challenged in D9 and you try to get married to someone from a long term perspective, guess what's going to happen? The communication is going to break down. I don't care how strong it is in the D1, it's strength damage in the D9. You're not going to be able to communicate effectively. Why? Because your animalistic tendencies are going to override your rational processes. If you want to, have a controlled sex life where you're not being drained, or and women get drained too. They just replenish faster, but they get drained too, and it sidetracks you from your what? Spiritual development. You want to see Mars and see how strong it is in the D9, and say it's strong, then the person is going to control their passions. They're going to control their temper. They're going to control their ability to, right, do a Lorena Bobbitt on you, right?
Oh snaps! Yeah, that's it.
Look at If we looked at Lorena Bobbitt's chart, the D9, Mars will sure as toe up without even knowing what it is. It may be that way in the D1 too, because they kind of correlate sometimes. In fact, they do correlate. But the thing is that now we begin to take a purview of what we're really dealing with in regards to spiritual development, your dharma, your purpose. What's going to elevate you when you're able to say, "Yep, I'm ready to go. It's time for me to go in." Then you can say, "Okay, now," and we can look at the D9. Yeah, they faced some challenges, but they overcame them, or they were overcome by their challenges, and they divorced how many times? How many baby mamas and daddies do they got? Right? Because when you give a child, that is your husband. That in your child, that's your wife, whether you like it or not. That's why it's better to look at the D7, because then you have a better understanding of what you like. But the D9 is going to show where you fail at that, not going where you succeed, where you fail. So, like I said, the D9 is a very misunderstood chart. When it says the spousal chart, one of the things that people have to consider is that when you take a vow, what is a vow? A vow, do you
Promise.
just make a vow to the person at the corner store?
Nope.
Do you make a vow to your boss, to your superior? Do you even make a vow to your brother or sister? Do you make a vow to your mama? None of these people hold a vow or hold the potential. Now, you might make a promise, but I'm talking about a vow. A vow is different from a promise. A vow is saying that, we try to make deals and bargains with the supreme being. If you know who you really are, you do this. Oh Lord, if you help me out this situation, I'll go ahead and I'll stop smoking. Lord, if you help me out this situation, right, I'll uh I'll stop cursing people out, right? This is we bargain with God. We try to. But when you're serious, and you make a concerted effort and put it into some spiritual writing upon your soul, upon your being, and say, I am going to change my life, and I make a promise to do this. And you usually do it through some means, which is a spiritual or religious organization. That's a vow. When you say, I'm not going to eat any meat any longer, that's a vow. When you do it through a spiritual context, not because it's healthy, but because you recognize the larger spiritual framework of it and you understand how it impacts you on multiple levels.
Right.
I make a vow of abstinence. I take a vow of abstinence. I'm not going to have sex outside of what? My spiritual connection to another being. That's a vow. How many people are serious about the vows?
Not a lot.
How many people take the till death do us part? That's a joke. As soon as you say that, the next 5 minutes, they bringing up the annulment papers. The person went outside and talked to another chick, and now you ready to he talked to my girlfriend and he gave her the side eye. This is the I'm already making them. I'm telling you, I've seen it. I've seen it firsthand. I'm like, what? You just got married? I know, but I don't know what I was doing. Right? I know you didn't know because you didn't know it was a spiritual vow involved. And then it breaks, and then they go back to the dating scene. They back in the pool again. They swimming, right? They get caught by a hook. We get caught by a hook. He got the hook is, oh, he's good in bed, or the hook is he got money, or the hook is he makes me feel like a woman, or she makes me feel like a man. These are hooks. You get caught by the hook, and then you're on the line like a fish, and they take you out of water. They take you out your natural single life envelopment, and then that's it. And you want to dive back into the pool again. This is the conundrum of life for most people in the Western sense, and some people in the Eastern countries too. It's not like the world's not been westernized. It has. But if you look at those pockets of life in areas where they haven't yet just fallen all the way in, and they still live to some degree of a spiritual program, they're a little it's a little different. But the other thing is that vows are taken as far as renunciation. You make a commitment to the supreme being and say, I am going to live a life that revolves around living spiritual laws. 42 laws, 42 negative confessions, 11 laws of Ma'at, or the 613 commandments, whatever it may be, right? Or to love thy neighbor as thyself. What is it? To love God with all thy heart and mind, and to love thy neighbor as thyself, right? Whatever your laws that you capitulate to live, and you make a concerted, conscious effort, especially when you do it amongst other people, because they're going to hold you what?
Accountable.
Accountable. That's when it's harder to break. When you are amongst your brethren and brethren say, look, brother, I've done some things I've sold drugs in the past. So I'm gonna go take a vow to make sure I work in an environment and on one day of the week where I repair my harm. You know, Tookie Williams is a great example. And I am not saying he's a person to look to as the litmus test, but he tried to at least curb some of the things that he did in the black community as far as the output of the gangs and things like that. And it's unfortunate that he was removed from this planet before he could really make an effect on that as far as that's concerned. But if you've ever done street business, right, harmed other people in regards to that life, and you said, I'm going to make a concerted effort to do that at least once a month, twice a month, whatever it is, and you do it and you live that truth, that's a vow. And the supreme being lightens things for you and they open paths and you become quote unquote fortunate. That's why I say it's unfortunate that the system chooses to, right, cannibalize black men and use us as scapegoats for the real atrocity that's happened as far as the precursor of slavery. And I can't blame them because we all have a choice to do things. But there is a pool that we live in. In that pool, we kind of have been confused as far as who our real enemy is. Of course,
Right.
the real enemy is yourself, but it plays out through other things in society. So, when you talk about vows, these are vows. These are things that catapult you spiritually. It's dharma. It's like you said, it's hard, right? So the ninth house, why read it for somebody if you know they ain't even what are you talking about, right? That's when I go to the D7 and I start reading from the D7 as I'm reading from the D9 because that's carnal, that's physical. Anybody can make a baby. That's why it's called the
Right.
chart of children, right? And literally, it's the children making more what? Children.
Children.
That's the secret of astrology. You have to know what is really being said. You don't become your D9 after 40 years of age. You don't do that until you begin to live something because that life is going to make you choose if you're wise. Nobody's going to make you choose. You're going to choose. You're going to make yourself choose if you're wise. Life just presents you with the options. But, enough about the context of it. Just go and try to look at the D7 from the D9 point of view and begin to see. You'll start to see your mate and mates that way. Because each child, let's say if you have seven different children from seven different people, right? Each one of those children, it becomes the person that gave birth to those children becomes a wife or a husband. Trust me, you can see it through the D7 because it's the children's chart. Literally, it's the mate's chart. It's the person that you bring a child through chart. That's what it is. Because the D9 has nothing to do with that. There's people that never have children ever, and they still have a what? A person they committed a vow to.
Right.
So the D9 is a spiritual apparatus. Don't play with it and start thinking I'm gonna find my man or I'm gonna find my woman and I'm gonna be happy with that because usually it's the opposite. You're gonna be miserable because you haven't developed yourself. You haven't developed your will.
Right.
So, with that being said, right, all planets in the D9 can be looked at, each one of them from a spiritual context. We won't go through all the planets. We'll just talk about them in context to the charts because we can actually have a part two to this, right, and really get into the actual mechanics of the D9, right? Because when you get into it, then you start to say, man, Raw, this makes sense because it's not a relationship chart. It's a spiritual chart that happens to be an addition of or connected to trying to live out a life that is truly going to treat that other party or other person as if they are the vehicle of God. Because that's the person that knows you better than your mama. She knows when your mama taught you to wipe your butt, but you got dusty drawers. She washed, she's seen it, right? Right. She knows, right? You don't clean up after yourself. You're a slob or you're disorganized. She knows everything. She's the vehicle through which the eye sees, and she's gonna tell you about it. He's gonna say, "Hey, sis, you've been doing this, that, and the other. Let's try to curb that." And you know what we do as children that think we're adults? We start mouthing off.
Right.
And every time I look up, you telling me something, and now I got to see. And you ain't my the whole what's the adage? You ain't my
You ain't
mama. You ain't my
mind.
daddy, right? Well, guess what? The ninth house is the house of what? The father.
That. Yep.
See, that's when you begin to understand, oh, you're right. It is the house of the father. So if you're not willing to take the father's advice and your father is the person that gives you the best concentrated information to get you to slingshot you like Sagittarius is to shoot you to the moon, then don't deal with a mate. Don't
Right.
deal with us. Leave it alone. Stick to the D7. Stick to having babies.
Shout out to that.
Because you're damaging the fabric. You're damaging the fabric of society. You're damaging the thread. And when the one little thread you had those sweaters, you pull the thread, and the whole thing.
Unravels.
Every time you jump to a new mate and another mate, and before long you got a turtleneck, right? with
A
no
headband.
a head. You got a headband, but you started off with a sweater.
Right.
That's the damage that you do if you don't have spiritual development and trying to put yourself into a spiritual context through another person. Maybe we should call it the chart of a spiritual context through another person. That'd be a better statement for it. Because that's the only way you're gonna get to the D9 and get and think about it. When people do get serious about marriage, their lives do change for the better, for the most part. That's why it's called fortune. When you become spiritual adept and you control your appetites, you save money, don't you? You're not in the club being bludgeoned, right?
Bludgeons.
You're not in the right in the line of eating just any and everything. So your health becomes better. If your health becomes better, your brain, you think differently. See,
Right.
spiritual
That's
life.
that's
Go ahead.
that's an important point because a lot of times people when they're looking at astrology, it's like a you're looking at it like formulaic versus like why. You understand?
Right.
Why does this happen? Like, okay, yeah, you know, this planet in this house, this lord in that house generates this. Why? You understand what I'm saying? It's not just, just these little putting pieces together and just it's in a context. There's a reason why, that particular thing is like that or
Exactly.
whatnot.
Cause and
That you can
effect.
tie to real life.
Right. It's cause and effect. Every effect has its cause, right? We can see the cause and effects. And we see the ultimate cause by looking at your Atma Karaka. And we put it in the D9 to look at your Karakamsha and see the spiritual plan for the life. Like I'll tell you mine. Mine is Mars. I don't have to tell you everything to tell you a little bit because a little bit goes a long way in this science,
Mm-hmm.
right? Mine is Mars. My Atma Karaka is Mars. What does that mean? Right? It's as a young man, my temper was a force to be reckoned with. Right? From I would say 13 to 19, he didn't want to be in my company and cross me. It was a bad day, right? Especially in the later years. 21, 22, it really was on fleek. And then right when I hit my Jupiter Dasha, switched. I said, whoa, 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 whoa,
Mm.
right? Something I've been doing something real wrong here. So I had to change. But the program changes when the life pattern changes, and you can begin to see. Oh, I've been really mean to people. I flashed out. I flashed on too many people. And then you calm it down. It changes. The nature of you changes. As the people that meet me now that know me back then, I'm not even. They tell you he's not the same person. That's not the guy I know, and they're
Mm-hmm.
right. So when Mars is your Atma Karaka, it breeds anger, breeds resentment. It breeds animosity as your lesson plan. It breeds discipline as your lesson plan. It breeds having the ability to face adversity with a degree of decorum. You might say something that might do something, but I'm going to respond in a way that is dignified and controlled. Whereas before, you might be on the other end and some problems, right? So each one of these Atma Karakas has a spiritual plan. You see it in the context of the D9 and where the plan is adjusted, where the plan is capitulated, where the plan is hammered out. You see it especially from the fifth and the ninth from that particular placement. So we'll do another course. We'll do another course, another podcast on this, right? And we'll talk about some of those real kind of placements that you can begin to use for yourself. But let's look at some charts and really talk about some individuals. We got good old Yogananda here, right? And Yogananda, right? Interestingly enough, right, has a Leo ascendant. You can see spirituality through and through in his chart, right? I know some people have their opinions of Yogananda, I know people are going to say certain things about Yogananda and how he wasn't this and how he wasn't that. Until you walked another man's or another woman's shoes, it's wise to be quiet. It's just wisdom. Unless you walked in someone else's shoes, it's kind of difficult to say what their real path or what they how they were really judged. Because we can all talk about the mistakes that we make on a daily basis, but I can tell you this much: the information that he's rendered, and people say, "Well, he didn't write it." How do you know? People that are quick to judge others from the perspective of what they think they know usually need to look in the mirror. But nonetheless, Paramahansa Yogananda has a Leo ascendant, right? He has the ascendant Lord in the fifth house. The fifth house, of course, is a Dharma house. Shows a very prominent individual that would be a spiritual teacher. Fifth house is teaching others, guiding others, getting others, giving others insight. And this is one of the things that he's called to do, the task that he started. He knew this from a very early age. If you ever read Autobiography of a Yogi, right, I'm pretty sure that you'll quickly ascertain that something inside of him pulled him or pushed him in this direction, right, outside of, just other people. It's something internal, especially when the fifth house is connected to the sun and to the ascendant like that. The moon is in the ascendant as well, right? In fact, you can kind of see the hair, right? The ascendant he looks kind of like a lion a little bit, right? Has some lion-o features, right? If y'all know lion-o is, right? Show your age, but right,
Mhm.
it has a little bit of that kind of, big largeness to him in his disposition.
I believe he said he got some of that, some of his spiritual practices from his mother too.
And that makes sense. If he got that, then it makes sense to have that moon right in the first house, doesn't it? If he got spiritual practices from his mother, moon's in the ascendant, right? So nonetheless, right, you can see that Jupiter's in the eighth, conjoined Mars, right? Definitely someone that has an adept understanding of occult knowledge, and he talks about occult knowledge in his autobiography of a yogi
Oh yeah,
a great deal, right? In fact, he kind of talks about astrology to a great degree, but he says that astrology can't control you, which he is right. But it can't control you unless you have a what?
well,
Will.
Unless
he
you will,
said.
right? It did say that, didn't it?
Yep, that's why he said the wise man defeats his planets.
Wow,
That's what he said.
right?
Yeah,
That's heavy, right? A wise man defeats his planets, right? Or at least learns to ride them, to harness their energy,
right, right.
right? So by far you can see it, but let's look at the D9, right? Let's see if we can transfer over to the D9 what we see in the D1. Let's look at the ninth house. And his ninth house has Rahu, which Rahu's not, unless Rahu's with a very strong planet in the ninth house, it's what is called as Marana Sthana. It's a house that kind of creates
K2.
troubles.
You got K2 in there.
Does he?
Yeah, it's K2.
It's backwards on this one.
Yeah, it's different on this one. Oh, no, no, no. I'm talking about in the D1. I'm sorry.
Oh, okay,
Yeah,
okay.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
Wait a minute. Okay. Yeah, in the D1 he has Rahu in the ninth, which is a killer. It's a death house for Rahu in the sense, unless it's with a strong planet. Meaning, if it's with the Lord of the ninth in the ninth, then it becomes a very strong, powerful planet because it will cause you to catapult to higher levels, insatiably so, right? But if that's not the case, and Rahu's in the ninth, and of course, depending on the ninth Lord and how it's placed, and you see the ninth Lord in the D1 with Jupiter in its own sign, right? So it still gives them some positive outputs as far as the ninth house is concerned. But the D9 is Taurus ascendant. So the first house becomes the plan of spirituality that's made specifically for you and how you identify with your spirituality, how you identify with your spiritual growth and development. And guess what? Taurus exalts the moon, doesn't it?
Right.
Not only does Taurus exalt the moon, what do we see the ascendant, the Swamsha, right? What do we see the ninth, the D9's Lord? Where do we see it? And we told you to look for Venus as the tell-all, didn't we? Right?
That's
Right.
his ascendant.
Right. It's in the what?
So the 10th.
It's in
10th.
the 10th with Jupiter.
Right. And it's
So,
close. These planets, I mean,
yeah. It's
Venus, Jupiter, and Sun are like less than a degree from each other. Almost.
right, right.
They're very close. So Venus, barely takes the lead here.
So, in that case, right, then we can begin to see that this particular individual has a very strong propensity, right, to deal in living a life that's as a spiritual what?
Being
Feature.
Spiritual leader, right? Spiritual teacher, right? The ninth lord of the D1 is with the Swamsha or the D the is with the D9's ascendant lord, isn't it? That's a very strong placement for a spiritual leader, someone that identifies themselves as someone that is to guide others or to show others the path. Yes, the sun is debilitated. It is, right? Very much so. But that debilitation is very strongly canceled because the ruler of the sun, right, which is, right, Venus, is in a kindred from the moon. So that means that, and again, this the sun is his ascendant lord in the D1. So a lot of his egotism, even though it was there for as Leo ascendant, it was checked and controlled by teachers, gurus, and guides. So again,
right.
this shows a very strong propensity.
Almost put in a place of service in the D9.
Absolutely, it was definitely a put in a place of service because leaders are nothing but servants.
Hmm.
Not only that, right? When we look at the Atma Karaka, right? When we look at the Atma Karaka, it's Venus, isn't it?
Yep.
And if you look at Venus, right, in the ninth from Venus is this debilitated sun, and the debilitated sun has its debilitation canceled. So that what would consider to be kind of someone that is semi vacillating or his whole life was put on display in a way that showed that he overcame those inner weaknesses. Remember, the D9 is to show what's in the ninth house of the D1. We are unfolding it, we're unpacking it, we're taking a microscope or magnifying glass and looking inside of the ninth house with Rahu sitting there. So this is how all of these things came to pass when you begin to understand this from an inner world perspective, right? There's other charts that we look at the D20. We won't get into that so much, but the D20 is super strong as well in consideration to the ascendant. But again, these things hold fast because when you begin to see how this particular D9 is structured, he himself is identified as a spiritual teacher or guide. So this is when you begin to see how to interlace the two. And of course, um, this is this Taurus is which house in the D1?
10th.
10th house.
Mm-hmm.
So what does that say? He's a what? Natural born spiritual leader.
Yeah.
He's come to, that's his dharma purpose, wasn't it?
Yeah.
He's come to be a spiritual guide, leader, and teacher of others. Did he fulfill it? Okay, so you may say that he didn't, but I can say for certain, I think he did. Right?
So,
I can't say for certain. I think he did.
I mean, he's
Only
still his stuff his teachings are still around.
right.
His institute is still around. Many years after I mean, he was born in 1893.
That's a message, right? And not only that, right? Considering there's a very powerful yoga in the D9 when the Atma Karaka and the Amatya Karaka are conjoined, that's a Raja Yoga in the 10th house, right? So this is a very powerful spiritual individual, right? Let's look at somebody else. Let's see if we can look at some other details. Here.
You
Let's
want to
go
do
to.
Osho?
Let's do Osho. Oh man, let's do Osho. Right. Osho. Right. So Osho. Right. Let's see. Osho. Now let's look at his. Let's look at his. Yeah. Let's look at his his D
D9.
one. Let's look at his D1 first. Right.
That's it.
If you look at that D1. Right. My goodness. Right. Woo. Talking about karma. Right. All those planets. Right. All those planets in the eighth house. Now, if you know anything about Osho, and I know people will come and say, "Yeah, Osho was this, the other," I get it, right? You don't have to, right, tell me anything. I've studied these masters for years, right? I've studied their teachings. I've even been initiated into a few. So you can't, unless you actually have been initiated into them and actually sat under some of their tutelage, not personally, but through the lineage of line. It's kind of hard to say what they're really about unless you practice it and it either worked or it didn't work for you. But unless you can do that, then you should hold your refrain from holding your judgment. And even still, be careful of judging others lest you be judged. But nonetheless, let's look at this eighth house. This eighth house is packed. That's a major stellium. We've got Mars, Venus, we got Mars, Mercury, Venus, Moon, and Saturn in the eighth house. My goodness. The only other two houses that are lit up is the seventh and the third. That's a man that definitely is into tantra, right? And no, tantra is not sex. Don't don't be confused on that. Sex is a vehicle or a means of tantric practice, but tantric practice is not sex. You can do tantra without sex.
Right.
Right? If you don't, if you don't acknowledge that, go study Sir John Woodruff. Right, he has all kind of classic texts on tantra.
Or I mean, the real like the core, is um, the Mahavidyas, the Dasha Mahavidyas.
Mahavidyas is another aspect of sure. There's so many. Tantra, mantra, and yantra all have tra in it, doesn't it? Don't they?
Right.
Right. Tra just means to project
Hmm.
or protect, either way, right? Protect or project. So mantra protects the what?
Mind.
The mind.
Right.
Tantra protects the what? The body. Tanu Baba, Tanu is the first house. The first house is the what?
Body.
So Tantra is to protect the body.
Right.
Yantra, right, is to protect the inner being,
Soul.
the soul, to some degree. Because that is looked upon, the yantra is looked upon through the what?
Eyes.
Through the eyes. And the eyes are the gate to the what?
So.
So all these things, right? Mind, body, and what?
Soul.
Soul. That's what tantra in of itself means. It just protects the body. How many ways sex is a means to protect the body, right? Or a means to destroy it, isn't it?
Right.
So he was into practices that were tantric in origin, especially because the ascendant Lord is in the what? Eighth house.
Eighth house.
Sex is one of the major capitulations and crossroads that beings have to face in order to gain control over their nature. You know, if you understand salmon, right? You ever watch salmon, like watch, those like little National Geographic, watch that stuff because that stuff really teaches you faster, more about spirituality than a lot of other stuff does. But when you understand salmon, salmon will forego eating in order to spawn. In order to release their eggs and their sperm, they will forego eating and swim upstream, and they die once they spawn. That's shortly after. So they don't even the sexual drive is such a powerful drive in humans. To garner it or control it is tantric practices to control those forces of creation. But it's not tantra is that. It's just tantra uses that as a means to uplift or catapult the body to higher vibration. That's it.
Right.
And this man was definitely in that vernacular, right? I mean, he has books on tantra. I mean, he got a big thick book on nothing but, and and the thing about, he doesn't talk about sex the way you think he does. He actually does talk about it from that perspective of harnessing and controlling those forces of creation to put them into play. Well, the eighth house is lit up, but let's look at, right, the D9, right? And again, just so you know, there's an exchange. I mean, his whole chart is lit up this way. There's an exchange between the third and the eighth. The third house is the eighth from the eighth. Therefore, it is also a house of sexuality. Because sex is primarily in the mind, not just the body, right? So if you look at the eighth house with all those that stellium, let's see how it's spread out. Let's see how it's spread out. Well, we've got a Cancer ascendant, which puts it as the third of the D1, right? That means that he's definitely about expressing himself and saying things about his spirituality, right? He's there to literally tell or to convey, right? That's his spiritual dharmic path, right? Your dharmic path is what you must do in order to render yourself on that path, or to render yourself spiritually aligned. Interesting, right? It's a third, and Jupiter is in the third in the D1, isn't it?
Right.
So it ties directly back to it. But what is the Atma Karaka of the chart?
Jupiter.
Jupiter, and Jupiter rules the eighth house. So that means that his dharmic path was still tied to what? To tantric practices.
Right.
This is how you read it. I ain't saying nothing about marriage, have I yet, brothers? I haven't said anything about marriage. Not one iota. Right.
Right.
Eighth house stellium spread out, where those planets are spread out. Now we have the ascendant Lord, right, in the fourth house, right? The fourth house is the heart, or the contentment of whatever it is that you're looking at. So if it's for the D9, it's how well or how content or how heartfelt or how much little internal drive did he have to get this? Not just drive, but internal connections. How much the fourth house is called Bandha Stana, right? Bandhasthana, Bandh Stana, Stana, the house of binding, the house of being bound. So guess what? He was bound, right, to try to to follow that spiritual path by expressing it or communicating to others.
Right.
In context of the eighth house of the D1 that talks about tantric practices, controlling and funneling and focusing your spiritual appetites. That is what his dharmic path is. Ain't got nothing to do with a mate. I'm sure there's quite a few things that we could talk about in light of the interactions that he had from a perspective of the eighth house. But ultimately, this is his means of acquiring, right, some type of fortune or some type of what we call blessings from the supreme being. Do you think he was broke? No.
No.
Do you think he had problems paying his bills? No. Do you think Paramahansa Yogananda had? No. See, once you begin to live a spiritual path, those things are bequeathed to you. It's almost like taking a priestly or nun path, right? That happens when you things are kind of afforded to you. You ain't gotta, you don't have to beg and plead and hey, can you help? I mean, things are just manifest, especially when you're producing materials that will long outlive who you are. He died in the 90s, right, bro? Right?
Yeah, 1990.
90, okay, 90. So, and then he died in a Jupiter moon dasha, living out his spiritual mandate.
So that moon, that's also this sexual fluids, right? Or is that
Shukra, Venus
Shukra?
is,
That's
yeah,
Venus.
yeah,
Right, right, right.
right.
Gotcha, gotcha.
Well, Venus in his chart. Now we can get into a maybe different conversation about, because remember we talked about Venus.
Mhm.
Now again, you got to look at the whole context, but nonetheless, what is the Atma Karaka,
Jupiter.
and where is it in the Navamsha?
So,
It's in
In
the
the
ninth.
ninth
ninth.
house.
Yeah.
Ooh wee,
With
right?
K2.
With K2,
Yeah.
teaching him to detach, because you know how you detach. You got to experience something to detach from. It is the eighth lord of his D1 in the ninth house in its own sign, conjunct K2. But it is in opposition, it is counterbalanced, it is challenged, it is in a stalemate position from what? Venus in debilitation.
Right.
So these are some of his spiritual challenges, some of the things he had to grow from spiritually in order to render himself on the path of development, of reaching, shooting to the moon, as they say. Now, at least the old statement, what they say, if you miss the moon, at least you'll be what? Amongst the stars,
Stars.
right? So, did he make it? That's for him and his inner being to decide. I could pull a death chart, but again, the death chart will only render so much because ultimately, I'm not there, you're not there, we're not there. Only the inner eye, only that inner being, what we call a sar, only the one that you are trying to meet in the inner planes by having your heart weighed as being lighter than a feather. That's not for us to decide. But what we can decide to see if there's some struggles or at least some contingencies in there that might cause a derailment. And there is. Venus is in debilitation with Rahu in the third. And the third house in the D9 is your spiritual efforts. How much effort do you put towards creating a spiritual journey for yourself? How much force do you put into it? Well, Venus is there and is debilitated. So this can create some challenges in that area to some degree, right? But nonetheless, right, if you look at it from the context of what we're talking about, I'm not going to say it was canceled, right? Because I don't see any cancellations with regards to the debilitation, right? But,
Mm.
right, it's still there as an opposition to Jupiter. So that's the struggle, right? That's the splitting up of, I know I'm on this path, but I know these are energies that I have to control, and they may get out of control. But it's the battle, right? You put them in control, they get out of control. You put them in control, it's the battle, it's the struggle of life. So you can see by far, right, that this person again is on a path to try to master and control. And again, if you look at the fifth, right, from Jupiter as the Karakamsha, right, uh, you have Cancer and you have Scorpio, right? No planets in there, right? But nonetheless, right, still in all, you can begin to see from the Karakamsha still in the seventh from it is Venus, which still plays a strong role in trying to overcome the desired nature. So Osho, you can clearly see, and I'm not talking about good or bad. I'm just saying the person's spiritual path. That's it, right? For what it is. Let's move on, right? Because we've definitely, right, at least touched on a few things with regards to his process. Um, and the one other thing before we move on, his Atma Karaka is actually Gandanta.
Right.
That's a very, um, I want to say advanced, but a very, um, it's a hallmark of someone that is trying to leap over into a new reality, spiritually speaking, and it's exalted. So it's a, you know, what I mean, it's he's like concentrated as enough to where he's trying to change the trajectory of his spirituality through tantric practices. Right. That's how we would see it in regards to this. Right. And he in his third house of the D1, he's definitely one that espouses or says or talks about spirituality. So who we gonna do next? Who we gonna dive into next? You wanna do Casey?
Um, switch it up. Let's do Denzel or Angela Davis.
Okay. Oh, Angela. Angela Davis. Yes indeed. Right. Yes indeed. Let's do Miss Davis. Right. Miss Davis, right? So she's Aries ascendant, right? Definitely a woman that is purported to be about her people, right? The liberation and salvation of the black African American and black people in the United States of America, and maybe even abroad to some degree. But she's definitely one that was pump your fist. You can see her in her afro, right, in the 70s, right? Um, she's what the image of what we would consider soul power or sister power, right? Soul sister, right?
Right.
Um, she's a warrior. You can see in the Aries ascendant, right? You can see it right here, Aries ascendant. She's a warrior, right? She's a fighter, right? She's gonna push back. She's not gonna take it lying down, as they say, right? And it makes sense because this is what she's manifested herself as in this physical incarnation, right? She has the ascendant Lord conjunct Saturn, right, in the D1, which definitely gives her a contentious disposition to some degree. Anytime you have Saturn and Mars together, it can create someone that definitely has a strong nature, right? It makes them strong because life has already been set up to, right, push back while they push forward. The gas and the brake syndrome, as they say. It's in the second house of her early upbringing, so she may have had some consistent letdowns as a young lady growing up. So especially being around race and things of that nature. So definitely a sister that would, or a woman that was fighting for the cause of her people. You see the moon in the 10th house of leadership, sun in the 10th house of leadership. That sun and moon conjunct is a new moon, but it's also a very powerful position in the sense that it makes someone very independent natured and very much to a point where they are trying to manifest something on their own or to put themselves out there as a stand up person. Right? So these things are in the 10th house. Right? The ninth house, let's look at that, has Venus and Mercury. Interesting. Now, what could Venus in the ninth house produce? Right? She loves knowledge. Right? She's always advocating or teaching or espousing. The third Lord is in the ninth, right, with Venus. So this does present someone that at least studies, has knowledge, looks to principles. Definitely is an advocate of the court system because the sixth lord is also litigations and litigations and debates. Third, sixth lord, and it's in the ninth house. So she's one that will definitely what do they call it? Speak truth to power, right?
Right.
However, right, her Atma Karaka, right, is the moon. Now, and again, this is not a judgment, it's a statement that has been witnessed by many and even to some degree said of her own will as far as who and what she is. The moon is for a woman. See, the moon for a man, like Mars for a woman, is different for a man in the sense of all planetary placements. It's still similar in some degree, but it also has some other kind of differences.
Right.
Right? But for a woman, the moon holds a lot more weight than it would for a man per se. So as a woman, as a as the embodiment of the female of the goddess, let's just say it that way, right? This is where her lesson plan is, isn't it? Right? The lesson plan holds she's got moon in the 10th, right? Moon in the 10th house, right? in leadership position. So she's a woman that leads, a woman that fights. It's the moon, the Lord of the Moon is with Mars. So it shapes and kind of changes the context of who she is as a woman. She's a fighter. She's a leader. She's someone that's not going to just let you tell her what to do. But also the woman's a femininity. It's the soft side, the internal side, the maternal side, the nurturing side. Now, this is not will be not a sister that I would consider as nurturing, right? I mean, I could be wrong, right? But from what I can gauge and see, she's not someone that would be, sitting back, having babies and nursing, and that's the opposite of where she is. So that becomes the lesson plan, or kind of the thing that she has to kind of remember in this life. She has to learn that this is the thing that you kind of come to deal with as a woman, who you are as a woman, the type of woman. And that mean all women should be barefoot and that's not even don't even try that, right? I ain't said that. I'm saying that the essence of a woman is through different means than it is for a man. So for her internally, she knows this. She knows.
Right.
She can feel it, she can process it, because it's an uneasiness. And a lot of times when it's uneasy, it's just easier to stay with the same sex. I'm not ridiculing her. I'm saying what's easy, what the way out is. Because the way out is opposite to the way you should go. The moon in the D9 goes to which house?
12.
12th house is the house of what?
Escape.
Hey, so trying to get out of Dodge with facing the reality of her feminine side. I don't know if she has any children, but I would fairly seriously be surprised if she does. Right?
I think she has a daughter.
She might have
One.
one, right? And that one may have been a struggle. Right? She does have Jupiter in the fifth house in the D1, so it's very well possible she could have had a child. But even it's still right. It probably was, you know, that's it, right? And I don't even know what their relationship was like, because even though you have a child doesn't mean you take care of them or you render them as viable individuals that can continue their spiritual development or even know what it is. So for her, the feminine side, the maternal side, the the um, the goddess energy, as our ancestors capitulated it, not as Western society does. I'm sorry, I hate to be the bearer of bad news, right? But Western society is the antithesis of African traditional purviews and traditional Eastern purviews. It's the antithesis of it. So when we look at it from, and this is an ancient science, this is not something that you just, okay, well, now we're in this time, so we just change everything to this. No, it doesn't work that way. Spiritual truths are what? Spiritual truths.
Right.
Sorry. A man has a certain level of integrity as a what? A man. He has a certain dynamic. Doesn't mean that society doesn't change the dynamic, but the inner core of who that individual is comes from on high, not from society.
Right. Right. But see, that's the difference. I mean, because we live in a society that doesn't. I mean, we live in a mundane society, right? We live in a lack of a better word, secular society. You know, where they don't. These are things that are still in debate for them, right?
Mhm.
In regards to the existence of a higher being, the creator, and all these things are still debates for them,
Sure,
at least
sure.
in public facing. That's what they put forth.
I just want to make one address to Kenty. Right. I understand. Um, you know, it's good to play devil's advocate. I
Hmm.
understand. But when we talk about contextual things, if you would like Kenty, present us with the name which the Dravidians called those practices, if Tantra is what the invaders called it. Always give a solution to your problem. That is called wisdom. Otherwise, it's being a contrarian. We all know that there's always some older text or older context of a word that comes from another culture. I understand and I agree with you to a degree. When we talk about mantra, yantra, tantra, always give give. If you can't give it, then sometimes it's wise to keep those things to yourself. Because unless you can give a solution to the problem, one problem begets what? Two. So I hear you, I understand, right? But unless you can give me the original word, then tantra is what it is. But back to Angela, right? She has Saturn conjunct the moon, right? Saturn conjunct the moon is a heavy spiritual load, right? A heavy spiritual load. It's a very serious minded spiritual context, right? She's got now looking at it from the perspective of the what the ascendant is in the D9. It's the seventh house, isn't it?
Right.
Right. To the D1. That means that relationships relationships is the means to which she is to try to acquire her spiritual path. Now, it's well known that she became lesbian after so many years. I don't know if that changed back, but from the last time I checked, that's what the context was. And the
I think she
ascent,
has a wife.
yeah, she does, right? So when we talk about spiritual growth, I'm not a judge. I'm not sitting here on any horse looking down or around at people. I'm telling you, based on those spiritual tenets that your ancestors laid down, called Ma'at. Ma'at has it to where form and what?
Function.
Function marry. Now, I'm not a judge, but I know according to form and function, a seventh house um, stipulation shows that relationships is the vehicle. At the moon is the kind of soul's lesson, and this is the ninth house inner looking into the inner workings of the ninth house. And remember, she's got Venus in the what? Ninth house in
Right.
the D1, doesn't she?
Right.
I told you Venus is always a planet to look for to find out how much spiritual growth the person is looking at or looking for, and it's in the eighth house of the D9. That's a very interesting combination because now it's showing again the spiritual path is through relationships, through finding balance, to making sure that things that form and what function marry. Because it's an easy path to not face the side of you that has been, for the most part, by Western society, diminished or evolved. That's not easy. This is not our way of life. This is not the ancestral way of life that was coined in this spiritual practice or in this context as far as Jyotish is concerned. That wasn't it. It was a whole nother path. So this becomes the battle zone, the kind of seesaw effect, the struggle, the kind of mountain to climb for an individual with this type of place. This is the con. I didn't say anything about a relationship, and I'll keep repeating that to you because unless you understand that this is a spiritual chart that can only be rendered spiritually as far as marriage is concerned, unless the person takes a vow, or you'll see the lack thereof, and you see the lack thereof. Well, she's committed to one person. That's not the point. It's not the person that it's not being committed to a person. It's be committed to the what? Right person.
Right.
The person that begets the form and function, but what you're designed for. No one's, the supreme being don't make mistakes. Sorry. I know Western society argues with it because that comes from a pseudo spiritual kind of slant with an atheistic twist to it that the supreme being doesn't know what it does, what it's supposed to do. it puts people in the wrong bodies. Nah, not from this perspective. No, no. The supreme being knew exactly what it was doing when it dropped you off, right? And there's only two options: male or female. If there's a third option, it's not on this planet. So in that option, you can see the seventh house and the moon being the Karakamsha. Excuse me, the being the Karakamsha in um, Virgo, right, with Saturn, which is a very constrictive planet, right, with Mercury, right. Mercury is the planet of intellect and reasoning, but it's also the planet of excuses and what's the other word? Not excuses, but rationalizations. You can believe anything. Me and Sambo was talking over here. You can believe anything, right? You can believe
Sure
whatever.
can. Just make
You can make it real, right? But that doesn't mean it is real.
Right.
So this is her lesson plan. But she's also a very powerful black woman in the sense of civil rights and the advancement of African Americans. I will never take that. I'm talking about the ninth house matters. This is how you look at a destiny to see what is being unfolded. And to add the last kind of caveat to that, right? She's at a K2 period, right? She was in a Mercury dasha, right, up until from 2001 until um, 2018. Prior to that, she was in a Saturn dasha, and these are all planets that in some way affect her spiritual development because it's seen in context to the D9.
Right.
You see what I'm saying? So again, this is when you begin to look at it from a deeper perspective. Right? Who else shall we do? You want? Let's do Denzel. Let's jump on. Let's rock out with Denzel.
Yeah. Hold on.
Yeah. So my man, Denzel, right? Right. Virgo ascendant, right? At Virgo ascendant in the D1, right? And I never pegged Denzel for Virgo, but it's interesting. A lot of times, they kind of he's great on like as far as the camera, and he makes himself present when not when needed, but he's not like the person that's out in the limelight all the time. He
Right.
really isn't. He's kind of quiet, not quiet, but I'm not gonna say shy. But the Virgos, their 12th house is Leo, right? There's an internal side to them. They shine on the inside. They shine in behind closed doors. They like to be, express their kind of boldness and prowess, right, in internal matters. It's kind of Virgos are known for being, shy to some degree. He's not shy because he's definitely has stage presence and camera presence, but at the same time, he's just not out there. You know what I mean? Like a lot of stars are out there, like Will Smith, he's out there, right? All these others, there's a lot of stars. Eddie Murphy, he's out there. But Denzel, you got to figure Denzel out. You kind of look inside. You got to go find stuff about Denzel. You know what I mean? It doesn't fall in your lap. And that Virgo is just that. Definitely in the sense of being a master of what he does. He is when he goes to work, he goes to work. But he likes to help people, and Virgos love to help. They're helpers. They're natural helpers. He wants to be of service. He wants to help. He wants to assist man, assist people. So this is and he plays the good guy role. When he played the bad guy role, he did play it. I'm not going to take away from that, but he's the good guy. Denzel movie coming out. Okay, you know what type of good guy is he gonna be? Right.
Right. Well, I mean, he's done Frank Lucas.
Frank Lucas was a good guy.
sort of.
He was a
In a
good
way,
bad guy. You know what I mean?
yeah,
Like,
yeah, yeah, yeah. I mean, you
he
know,
like you love Frank Lucas. He made you love Frank, even though he was a snitch in the sense of the street world. He made
right,
you love Frank Lucas. Frank Lucas was trying to, I mean, the way he portrayed him. Now, say someone else had portrayed him, we might get a different picture of Frank, right? But the way Denzel rocked it, he was a cool dude. He just
he's a businessman.
businessman. Yeah, he wasn't a villain. I mean, he went and shot the dude in the forehead to make a statement, but he just asked for. I mean, he didn't come off as a villain, is what I'm saying, right? With Frank
Right,
Lucas. Although Frank Lucas was one of the biggest dope dealers, of his era.
right,
I mean, he pushed poison, right? It is what it is. I'm just saying facts, right?
right,
So, but Denzel's Virgo ascendant, right, is one that shows that he's very a perfectionist about what he does, right? And perfectionism, is a hallmark that literally you don't want to make mistakes. There's no such thing as perfect in this on this planet, but there's a process of perfecting, and Denzel definitely embodies that on screen, and I would even say off screen as well. Right? The ascendant Lord is in the fourth house, conjunct Sun and Mercury. Right? So it's a powerful yoga there, Buddhiyati yoga, and that's very common because Mercury is never more than 28 degrees from the sun anyway. But it
right,
is in the fourth house, right? And it does create a very strong propensity to be close to his natural upbringing, his mother, and his homeland, right? His native area. So, it just kind of makes a well rounded disposition to some degree. But the moon is in the fifth house, again, a spiritual house, right? That moon's Lord is exalted, even further strengthening that spiritual disposition, right? Jupiter isn't, he's got a Gajikasara yoga directly from the moon in the 11th. And that's a very powerful Gajikasara yoga. Very powerful.
right.
Very powerful because it rules the seventh and the 10th house. I mean, excuse me, the fourth and the seventh house, which is that's a very, because not every Gajikasara yoga is like that. And just because you have Jupiter aspecting the moon doesn't mean it's the classic Gajikasara yoga. It has to be qualified with planets that are placed well, because sometimes it can make you too grandiose and too boisterous and too large for your own good, which then can cancel that particular Gajikasari and make you into something else. So Gajikasari has to be qualified, and it is very well qualified. Moon rules the 11th house, and it's being aspected from Jupiter by Jupiter from the 11th. Very powerful, right? So, overall, good guy, right? Moon is the mind, right? His mental status is very well structured, very well disciplined, and very harnessed in on doing things in an appropriate manner. Not to say he doesn't have things that we all have our challenges. I don't want people to think I'm painting as some perfect person. We don't know because a lot of things haven't just come out, but he might have things that may surface later, like Bill Cosby. People knew, right, what Bill was doing, but things came out later. But again, just to say, I don't know personally what he's got going on in his backyard, but I can see from where I'm sitting, there's not a lot of scandal around him.
What I mean, it's not whatever it was. Is it doesn't appear that it's something that's defining. You understand what I'm saying? Like,
Exactly.
it's the same, conditionings and stuff that everybody, roll through, but it's not something that is a bigger deal enough to put a stain on them or
Staying on
anything
his
like
name.
that.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. That's what there's nothing that, no smut, there's
Hmm.
nothing that, yeah, that brother, he, did his woman wrong and none of that.
Yeah.
Um, so, interestingly enough, let's dive in. His Atma Karaka, right? Excuse me. Is Saturn. Mm. Now, Saturn Atma Karaka is very, very interesting, right? Because it makes you face things, right? But it's exalted. So he doesn't have a challenge, holding on to, you know, living out certain tenets. It does rule his fifth and his sixth house, which is for Virgo ascendant, it's kind of a mixture, right? It's 50-50 with Saturn. But the Saturn in being exalted is more of a 70-30, right? Because it has a very prominent position in where it's placed. So he does hold on to Saturn as an Amakaraka makes you become a lot more disciplined, right? And it makes you if it's damaged, you have to face a lot of challenging issues, patience, long suffering, right? Proper planning, right? Taking losses. But if it's exalted, then you have the ability to utilize the right timing, right? Being at the right place at the what?
Right.
Right time. Most people don't know he got his start primarily from knowing the right people, but also being at the what? Right place at the right time. Allowing life to lead you in a way that humbles you, humility, right? He's not an arrogant person by the least, right? He's very humble, and he knows, right? I mean, he knows, but he's not out there, putting himself out there as the man, but he knows he's the man when it comes to acting, and of course being a lady. The what the ladies like, I don't know if they like it now, but from when I grew up, Denzel was, every
Denzel.
yeah, Denzel, right? Eye candy or whatever, but you know this is Saturn as the Amakaraka. It teaches you the humility. It teaches you to play your part and play it well, to be a cog in the machine, but be the best cog you can, and then you stand out on your own. So this
Right.
is what it teaches. But in the light of the chart of the D9, the spiritual path, it's in the what? It's in the ascendant.
Right.
So he himself identifies with living a spiritual, disciplined, frugal life. Not frugal in the sense of being cost effective, but frugal as far as being uh, um, um, boisterous or overly confident. He's naturally humble in his spiritual approach. I know he's a Christian. I know we were talking about it behind camera. We were talking about, I think, was he, you know, a pastor, but he was on TD Jakes, and TD Jakes. I'm just saying what's said. I'm not saying that I agree or disagree. He called him pastor. He
Mm.
called Denzel pastor. And Denzel, I think, made a statement about the Will Smith incident at the Oscars, where he said they prayed for Will Smith at the Oscars. That's what their response was. So that's something that would someone that would do that with this Saturn in the ascendant, as far as the Atma Karaka, and it's in a very now it's not in the best position because it is with Mars, but the Moon does hold fast, right? That the Moon is exalted. So it kind of stabilizes anything that could go wrong on the other side with Mars, right? Right. So that at least gives us some context that his identity with his spiritual path is very strong. Right?
Right.
It holds weight in his life. He's not just out here doing things willy nilly, right? So, and sidebar, Kenti, I don't know if you're saying origins of sacred texts, Rig Veda, etc. is Saba originally named by Strabo as Moreau. I don't know what that means, but if you could qualify it in the chat, I'd appreciate it. And I can elaborate on what you say, right? But nonetheless, the ascendant lord of the Swamsha is Cancer in the third, right? It's in the third house, right? And that exchanges with Moon. So he has in the third house again is one's efforts towards living out your spiritual creed or living out a spiritual life or following a dharmic path or following a spiritual outlook. He does that, and he pushes it, right? He pushes himself in it. He espouses it. He said, "Hey, we prayed for him." And for Christian, that's their mantra. I like to see what other name there is for mantra out there, since that might be a new name for what. Anyway, he's prayer is mantra, right, in the West. So he, said something over will to try to, put some type of protection mantra, right, over. the individual. So, strongly connected to spirit, to a spiritual growth, right? Um, strongly, right? Devoted to trying to live a lifestyle that holds fast to some tenets. Saturn is the law, right? Jupiter is purpose in the sense, or not to say purpose, but it's the sense of understanding and it's intelligence, right? But Saturn is the law, right? I know in certain teachings, Jupiter is the law as well, but Saturn is really the law. It's the one that makes you follow the law. It's like, look, if you don't follow it, there's grave consequences. And he does follow it, internally, just by proximity of who he is. That's what Saturn does as an Atmakraka in a very strong sign with an exalted planet, right? Despite it being conjunct Mars. And its exchange, which also creates an increase in power. It is with Rahu, but Rahu is also with the Sun, which Sun and Rahu has a strange relationship because the Sun is kind of like what shines and Rahu tries to cloud. So there's maybe a struggle there in regards to the spiritual identity of which way to approach it, but it is at least under in his thought process of being done, of it being done, and he does do the best he can with the given context of his understanding. So that's why we don't see whole lot of mess. You don't see a whole lot of drama. You don't see a whole lot of you know flare ups. The wife come out saying, "Oh Lord, Denzel had 5 women." When I mean, you don't see that. It's there as a plain he's as a plain statement of, "I am who I am, and I try to live the best of what I can live." So that's a D9 that shows that, right? K2 is in the ninth house. You know, it definitely can detach him from having a strong connection to other teachers or gurus in the sense of guidance, but Saturn itself is still very strong and it rules the ninth. So he himself may, I'm pretty sure at some point, maybe try to become a pastor or preacher. So let's jump on to somebody else. And I think we got one more to do and then we're done for the night.
No, I think that's it. That's
That's
it.
it.
That's all we got.
That's it.
Yep.
What we got. That'll work. That'll work.
Indeed.
So this is the way we look at it, folks, from where I teach, right? If you're interested in taking the courses, I got my good brother here. He's a student. He can attest
Take
to,
them.
right?
Take the classes.
Right. He can attest to what we do, right? And how we go about it in the process and how we build you up until this point. So, take advantage, right? No one's promised tomorrow. I'm here for my classes are not that expensive. The courses are not that costly compared to other teachers out there. They're very cost effective. So let me know if you're interested. We definitely would love to have you. Again, we are pretty further along in the course, but if you think you can double dutch or you can chew bubblegum and think at the same time, you're more than welcome to join. And with that being said, this is the first kind of podcast we kind of have used the Navamsha to go in depth, and there's going to be others. We will at some point come around to seeing how you can see or utilizing in a way to see a context as far as a real serious committed union.
Indeed. 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 So with that being said, this has been episode 12. Thank you all for tuning in, and we'll be back next week with another great episode. All right, we're out. Peace.
It's